All right, good morning again, everyone. So before we begin, some housekeeping matters. Number one, I forgot to, I don't know if I've mentioned it last time, pero I included a homework zero. Ano ang title nun? I think it's homework zero, which is a consent form. Nilagay ko siya under the problem sets. Let me see if I can pull up my Canvas account here. It's loading. Hindi ko yata na-announce pero some of you I think already seen this last time kasi may mga na-checkan na rin ako. So I would like to get your consent, several statements, academic policy, and data privacy statements. So that is consent form, which is under the problem set. So if you check your modules, nasa week 2 module siya, consent form. So you can click on it. And then this is due on the 27th. So that's going to be on Monday, 11:59 p.m. So it's worth 5 points. Idadagdag ko siya sa problem set. So make sure to submit a consent and declaration form. You just need to download the PDF file. You see at the bottom of the panel here, the consent and declaration.pdf. Tick the boxes, put the date, write your name, and then sign the form and upload it on Canvas. So that would be worth 5 points, which I will add on to your scores on the problem set. So this is just for me to get your consent to upload the materials on whatever website I find appropriate. And second is also it contains an academic honesty statement para hindi nyo na isusulat yung nandun sa study guides every now and then. Meron akong document which could be a blanket statement for the entire semester so that you don't have to write that long, lengthy statement na prescribed dun sa mga worksheets. And then also it has a data privacy statement, which is standard in the university. Okay. And then also I uploaded the answer keys to the answer key to worksheet 1. So please access the answer key page only if you have submitted the corresponding worksheets already. So if you go here, I have here a statement saying that by accessing the file, sinacertify nyo na nakapagpasa na kayo ng assignment na yon, and you agree not to share it with anybody. So this is for your personal use only. Kanya-kanya na lang download. So if you are not yet on Canvas and you want a copy of this and you have submitted the worksheet for week 1, then just let me know via email. Pero again, just access the answer keys once you have submitted your work. Usually I will upload the answer keys perhaps every Wednesday. So kung deadline yung worksheet ng Monday, I'll see to it that the answer key will be uploaded on a Wednesday. And again, please access it only if you have submitted the corresponding assignment. And then lastly, I also uploaded the first problem in our problem set. So this is problem set 1.1. So actually hindi pa siya na-upload dito sa Canvas app ko, pero assign ko na siya. You can access problem set 1.1 and this would be due on the 27th, October 27 at 5 p.m. But kung kaya nyo siyang gawin right now, please do so para hindi na kayo matambakan ng problem set. Matagal pa yung deadline, pero again, pwede nyo na siyang simulan para konti na lang yung kailangan yung isubmit sa October 27. Okay? So you can access everything in Canvas right now. Let me just show you the problem set quickly. This is the first item in the problem set. I'm thinking problem set number 1 will be comprised of 5 problems. So this is the first of those 5 problems. So I entitled it Logical Arguments in Media. So your task is to spot a verbal logical argument in media. It can be social media. It could be in the traditional media like newspapers, TV, or any other medium that you have an access to. So kailangan nyo lang humanap ng logical argument, translate this argument into symbols, and determine whether it is valid or not using the tools that we discussed and what we will discuss today. And I think please in your submission, isama nyo yung actual file o isang link dun sa material na ginamit nyo, or pwedeng link na lang, attachment, o kaya picture tas i-paste nyo dun sa PDF file. So this is worth 10 out of the 50 points for problem set 1. The only requirement is that the argument should involve at least 2 propositions. Okay? So bahala na kayo kung ilang propositions o gaano kahaba yung argument. Just make sure meron dalawang propositions na involved. Okay? Any questions with the homework, with the problem set? Problem 1? I hope that's okay. So if there are no questions, then let's continue our discussion and hopefully we finish this file today. So last time we talked about what an argument is, and we look at the direct method in showing that an argument is valid. So the direct method involves creating a conditional statement with a conjunction of the premises as the antecedent and the conclusion as the consequent. One way to show it directly is via constructing a truth table for that conditional statement and show that it is a tautology. However, as some of you have noted last time, hindi efficient yung pagpapakita ng buong truth table. Kasi ang problema, pag marami ka ng propositions involved, there would be a lot of rows. In fact, there would be 2 to the n rows in your truth table if you will exhaustively create it or show it. So another way to do the direct proof is just to consider the cases when all the premises are true. So medyo mababawasan na yung rows of truth table, but make sure you don't forget anything. So that could be a little bit tricky if your premises are compound propositions. Okay. Pero nevertheless, that's one quick, or actually that's one easy way to show that we have a valid argument. And then I think last time we talked about sound argument. So as we have mentioned, yung test for validity of an argument doesn't necessarily imply that the argument is sound. Hindi kailangan mag-make sense yung argument. The test for validity is only concerned about the structure of the argument. And it answers the question, does the conclusion follow from the premises? So lagi nating ina-assume sa test of validity na true lahat ng premises. And we want to see whether we get a true conclusion out of those premises. Checking the soundness of an argument is another thing. I think we define that here, okay, in remark 14. An argument is sound if and only if it is valid and all of its premises are true. So going back to the example last time, we have these 2 arguments here. Let me just erase what we wrote here. Okay. First statement, first argument, if it is a fish, then it is a mammal. If it is a mammal, then it's a human being. Hence, it is a fish. Hence, if it is a fish, then it is a human being. So I guess you can show that this is a valid argument. Okay. You can use the direct method, construct the truth table, and you will see that if we assume the premises to all be true, then the conclusion will follow. All right. But again, the conclusion doesn't make sense. If it is a fish, then it is a human being. We know that to be false. But nevertheless, the structure of the argument is valid. It's logical, all right? However, it is not sound. Kasi sabi sa remark 14, it would be sound if and only if it is valid. So it's a nice statement 1 is a candidate. Pero may second condition, yung pagiging sound. Dapat yung mga premises ay lahat true. Of course, the first premise, if it is a fish, then it is a mammal. That's not generally true. Some fish are not mammals, right? So ibig sabihin, false ito. We know that this is false, so hindi na siya sound. Pero again, for the test of validity, we need to assume all the premises to be true. So this is the structure of this argument is logically valid, pero it is not sound because it doesn't make any sense in real life. Okay. Now, the second statement here, you can show that this is invalid. Although if you look at the conclusion, Manila is a crowded city, we might agree with that proposition, or we might consider that proposition to be true right now. However, this conclusion doesn't follow from the premises. So kahit i-assume ko na true yung premises, may makikita akong case na posibleng maging false yung conclusion. Okay? So that means there is an assignment of truth values to to the to the propositions involved in the premises that will allow me to have a false conclusion. So the structure of the second argument is invalid, at least logically speaking. There's a truth value assignments to the propositions involved that will result into true premises but a false conclusion. So kaya siya naging invalid. And since it is invalid, the argument has no chance of being sound. Kasi para maging sound yung argument, kailangan valid siya muna. Plus the requirement that all premises must be true. Okay? Now, there are some common error in reasoning that results in an invalid argument, and they are listed here. I think we have read this last time, but the common mistakes actually would be lines 4 and 5. The converse error, which is affirming the consequent, and the inverse error, which is denying the antecedent. Now, let's look at them a little bit closer. So yung number 4, the converse error is something of this sort. So you assume that P implies Q. Tapos kung alam mo na totoo si Q, some people might conclude that P is also true. But you can find a truth value assignment na true yung premises pero false yung conclusion. Kasi hindi porket nangyari si Q, nangyari si P. Alam natin dito pag nangyari si P, sure na magpa-follow si Q. And nangyari si Q. That is not enough to conclude that P happened or P is true. Kasi there might be some other factors that led to Q being true. If you want to have a formal proof of invalidity, so kailangan mo lang humanap ng truth value assignments kay P and Q such that will have true premises. So gusto mo to maging true, gusto natin to maging true, gusto ko to maging false para ma-prove na siya ay invalid. Okay? So we'll need to look for truth values for P and Q such that this will be true. And of course, we know this would be invalid because we have true premises. True and true is true. So true yung conjunction ng mga premises, and yet it implies a false conclusion. So we have true implying false. False yung long conditional statement that embodies the argument. Okay? So ano kaya yung tamang truth value assignment kay P and Q para masabi natin na invalid yung argument? So again, ang goal, true dapat yung premises, tapos false yung conclusion. Of course, here we're saying that the conclusion must be false, so dapat si P ay false. Tapos kailangan maging true lahat ng premises, so dapat si Q ay true. Pero will that make premise number 1 still true? Well, with this truth value assignments, we have false implying true, so premise number 1 is still true. Okay? So that means we have found a truth value assignment to the individual propositions so that the premises are still all true, but the conclusion is false. Since we have found one such case, then we say that this is indeed an invalid argument. And actually, this is a common fallacy called the converse error. Parang we are attributing the wrong cause to a conclusion. Dahil nangyari si Q, hindi necessary na nangyari si P. Alam lang natin pag nangyari si P, magpa-follow dapat si Q. And nangyari si Q. We are not yet sure that P happened in the first place. Okay? The inverse error can be proven to be invalid in the same manner. So you can do this and try to do it on your own. Pero madali lang naman yan. Dalawa lang yung propositions na involved. You can find a truth value assignment such that the premises are all true and the conclusion is false. Okay? All right. So, well, there is an indirect method for testing the validity of arguments, which is basically what I did here. Okay. Kasi sabi nga dito, medyo cumbersome or tedious yung pagpapakita ng buong truth table. So the indirect proof of testing the validity of an argument is to show the impossibility of the case when the premises are true and Q is false. So pwedeng i-assign natin yung truth values na true sa lahat ng premise, and let's see if it is possible to have a false conclusion. If it is impossible to have that, then we can conclude that the statement, that the argument is valid. Pero kung may makita tayong isang case na true yung premises, false yung conclusion, automatically the argument is invalid. And that is what we call the indirect method. So you can think of what I did here to be though invalid yung mga statements. So this is an indirect proof of validity or invalidity for that matter. Okay. So let's look at some examples. Okay. Or actually dito nilagay pa niya yung steps for showing the validity of arguments using an indirect method. So we will assume that the argument is invalid, parang indirect proof. So assume natin na invalid yung argument, and there's only one case when the argument would be invalid. Lahat ng premises ay true, false yung conclusion. And then number two, we'll work backwards until the truth values of all the components are derived. If there are no contradictions, then that means that the argument is invalid. Because kung walang contradiction, ibig sabihin posible na lahat ng premises ay totoo, pero false yung conclusion. Okay? But if we can find one contradiction, then we can say that the argument is valid. Kasi hindi siya pwedeng maging invalid, so we are forced to conclude that it is valid. Okay? So hopefully that makes sense. Parang ang dami ko nang sinabi. Let's look at one particular example. Perhaps this might help. Okay. Okay, let's try to use indirect method in order to prove the validity or invalidity of this statement. Okay, so let's do a proof, and let's do an indirect proof. So pagpasensya niyo na yung sulat ko, medyo maaga pa. So again, for an indirect proof, we will assume that the statement to be, the conclusion is false. So we suppose P implying R is false. Okay. And the premises to be true. Okay. So false yung conclusion, true yung dalawang premises. Tapos gusto nating ipakita or gusto nating i-check kung posible nga ba ito. Kung posible to, then it's invalid. If it is not possible because we will encounter some contradictions, then that means that the argument is valid. Because true implying false cannot happen. Okay? So if P implying R, the conclusion is false, then that means P must be true and R must be false. Right? So si P dapat ay true, si R dapat false. Kasi nagiging false lang ang conditional kapag ka true implying false. Okay? So ibig sabihin, kung true si P, so lahat ng P dun sa premises ay true, lahat ng R ay false. Okay? Now, let's see. Well, look at the second premise. The conclusion of, or sorry, the consequent of the second premise is false. So para ma-maintain natin yung truthfulness ng premise number 2, ibig sabihin dapat si Q ay false. Kasi pag naging true si Q, magkakaroon tayo ng true implying false, which is false. But we are assuming that the premises are all true, including the second premise. So this forces us to accept that Q is false. So false dapat si Q. Because again, otherwise, the second premise will be false. Okay? Now, kung ito ay false, ibig sabihin, but this will make the first premise false. right? Because the first premise will turn out to be a true statement implying a false consequent, which we know to be false. So, but again, we have assumed that all the premises are true. Ibig sabihin, there would be a contradiction here. So, a contradiction. Because we have assumed that the first premise is true, and it turned out that the first premise must also be false at the same time. And that is something that cannot happen. A statement cannot be both true and false at the same time. All right? So that means there's a contradiction. Thus, we cannot accept the supposition that the conclusion is false. So therefore, the argument is valid. Okay? Does this make sense? Okay lang ba yung indirect proof?
Papa, sir.
Yes,
Yes
po.
po, sir.
All right. Thank you for
Yes po,
letting
sir.
Okay. Wow, ang bilis niyo ngayon sumagot, ah. Hindi, nakakonting sip lang ako nung kape ko. But anyway, all right. So, okay, that's great. And then perhaps you can try illustration 17. Or gawin ba natin yung 17? I don't know if I will have time, but okay, let's see. Let's try 17. Or pero nandito na yung proof ng 17, no? So, probably can read the proof of illustration 17 on your own. Nandito na naman siya. Perhaps let's try one of the problems in exercise 19. Which one do you want to do? Oh, actually, the second statement is the converse error, which we have seen to be invalid earlier. And then this is the inverse error, or actually hindi to inverse error, not Q. Yeah, I think this is different. So let's try this one. Using indirect proof. Again, the direct proof, gagawa kayo ng truth table para ma-test kung tautology ba yung giant conditional statement. Okay? Pero sa indirect proof, posibleng hindi natin kailanganin yung ganung kahabang solution. And again, for an indirect proof, we assume the conclusion to be false and then force the premises to be true. So here we assume all the premises to be true. And suppose that the conclusion, which is not P, is false. Okay? So kung si not P ay false, this means gulo yung sulat ko. Maaga pa kasi guys, so pagbigay nyo na. So this means P is true. Okay? So true daw si P. So yun yung truth value niya. True si P. So ibig sabihin false yung negation niya. Okay? Everything's well. But if you look at premise number 1, to maintain the truthfulness of premise number 1, Q cannot be false. Kasi magiging true implying false, which is false. But we want to force the premises to state to be true. So that means Q is forced to be true, right? So thus, Q must be true. Because otherwise, the first premise would be false. So true dapat si Q, pero true dapat si Q, so it follows that not Q must be false, which is a contradiction. So I usually use this blitzkrieg or this Harry Potter arrow to denote that there's a contradiction. Because again, we have shown that Q or Q must be true. So it will imply that not Q must be false, but it so happened that not Q is the second premise, which we assumed to be true earlier. So that means that our supposition that the conclusion is false is not true. So thus, we are forced to accept that the argument is valid. Kasi hindi siya pwedeng maging invalid. Kasi pag invalid siya, magkakaroon ng contradiction dun sa premises. Okay? So that's the test for invalidity. Actually, yeah, it is the test for invalidity or an indirect proof for validity. Okay. So, all right. So, summary lang naman to. Okay. So, do you think you're ready to answer some exercises regarding direct or indirect proof of validity of statements? Hindi ko lang maalala sa worksheet number 2 kung ano yung nandun. Okay, so there's a good question in the chat. So worksheet. Okay, para maging... Okay, let me see. Actually, kanina nung pinabrowse ko nga yung notes, parang napaisip din ako doon. Let me see. So here, Okay, so I guess here, I think there are some of you who already submitted worksheet number 2. Kindly correct me if I'm wrong, but just basing on how it is written, I think there should be brackets here. And, hold on. Hindi pala pwedeng nandun yung bracket. Okay.
Sir, meron pong magkasunod na walang connectives. Baka dun po yung putol.
Yeah, eto yun, no? M implying N. Tapos, eto. Tapos, ang dami namang may putol. Okay, can you give me can I double check this and then just upload it later? Thank you for pointing this out. Medyo magulo yung statement, no? Yeah. Merong N and O. Feeling ko, sir, hiwala yung N saka O. Yeah, supposedly, feeling ko rin magkahiwalay itong NO. Magkaiba silang proposition. But there's no connective between them. So, yeah. Let me just rephrase problem 1 later. So, yeah, I'll check on that. May problema ba sa problem 2? Yeah, I guess a problem 2, my problem then. So, formatting error, probably. So, unless BA is a different proposition. But yeah, let me get back to you on the worksheet. So yeah, pag-isipan ko kung ano dapat yan. Thank you for pointing that out. Hindi ko rin siya napansin nung in-upload ko. Probably there a formatting error happened along the way. Okay. Nangangamoy extension ba ng worksheet 2? So let me see. If I can finish it today or the corrections today, then sige, nevertheless, I'll give you one more day to finish worksheet 2 kasi kami yung may problema. May typo dun sa worksheet. So, yeah. Okay. So, let me get back on you on that. Bigyan ko na lang kayo ng one additional day to finish the worksheet. So, I'll upload the correction later today. Okay. Now, let's move on to formal proofs of validity. Now, ang problema dun sa methods natin so far, dun sa direct method natin ay cumbersome siya or tedious siya, lalo na kung maraming involved na propositions. And actually, if there are more premises, then it might be even more cumbersome. So to remedy that, and this is one deductive process that we want to do, okay, or we want you to learn, so we can use or we can devise a formal proof of validity. And for a construction of a formal proof of validity, pwede tayong gumamit ng rules of inference. I think you also encountered the rules of equivalencies before in AMAT 19 or MAT 20, and also in your review last time. But these are some new tools that you can add to your list. Okay. All right. So yeah, tingnan natin sila isa-isa. So the first one is modus ponens. So this is a valid argument which you can use in proving in steps in your proof or improving the validity of more complicated arguments. So if you have a premise or in one of your deductions, nagkaroon ka ng P implies Q, tapos meron kang P. So these two guys or these two propositions are enough to conclude Q. And we call that the rule of modus ponens. All right. So we usually abbreviate it by MP. Okay. And then the rule of modus tollens. If you have P implying Q, and Q did not occur, okay, or Q is not true, so therefore P is not true as well. Okay. So P implying Q, tapos meron kang not Q, ibig sabihin not P. Okay. You can make sense out of it by saying na pag nangyari si P, dapat mangyari si Q. Eh, hindi nangyari si Q. So, ibig sabihin, hindi nangyari si P. Kasi kung nangyari si P, dapat nangyari si Q. Eh, hindi nga nangyari si Q. So, dapat hindi nangyari si P. So, in a nutshell, that's modus tollens for you. So, let's abbreviate the modus tollens rule by MT. Now, hypothetical syllogism is sort of the transitivity for the implication. So if P implies Q and Q implies R, that means or that is sufficient to conclude that P implies R. So kasi daw pag si P ay nangyari, mangyayari si Q. Eh pag nangyari si Q, mangyayari si R. Therefore, pag nangyari si P, mangyayari si R. So that's hypothetical syllogism. Okay. Number 4 is called the disjunctive syllogism. As the name implies, merong disjunction na involved. So here, P or Q. Pero hindi daw totoo si P. Pero remember, we are assuming the premises to be both true. So, hindi daw totoo si P, pero totoo yung P or Q, so that means Q must be true. Parang sort of by elimination. P or Q is true, but P is false, so that means Q must be true. And that rule is called the disjunctive syllogism. So if you want, you can prove the validity actually of these arguments. But I will assume that we have proven the validity of these 9 arguments. So pwede na natin siyang gamitin sa mga proofs natin later. Okay. Number 5 is a little bit complicated. This is called the constructive dilemma, or CD. What are the premises in this argument? In a constructive dilemma argument, the first premise is a conjunction of two conditional statements. So we have P implying Q and R implying S. So in layman's term, ina-assume natin na totoo itong dalawang implication na to. Pag nangyari daw si P, sure tayo na mangyayari si Q. Sure din tayo na kapag nangyari si R, mangyayari si S. Okay? So ito yung dalawang conditional statements. Tapos, kung alam natin na nangyari either si P or si Q, ibig sabihin, mangyayari either si Q o kaya si S. And I guess this is the most that we can conclude because we don't know which among or which between P or R happened. Okay? Basta alam lang natin si P o kaya si R nangyari. So ibig sabihin, either si Q o kaya si S ay magfa-follow. Okay? So, but take note, the connective here is or. Kasi hindi tayo sure kung alin kay P o kaya kay R yung naging totoo. So either mangyayari si Q o mangyayari si S. Hence the connective or. Okay? Now, moving on. Rule of inference number 6, destructive dilemma, or DD. So similarly, we have a conjunction of two conditionals. Pag nangyari si Q, pag nangyari si P, mangyayari si Q. Tapos pag nangyari si R, sure tayo na magfa-follow si S. Tapos ano yung second premise? Hindi nangyari si Q. O kaya, hindi nangyari si S. So ibig sabihin, hindi nangyari yung mga consequent dito. So that means either P did not happen or R did not happen. Okay. So that's destructive dilemma. So I understand medyo marami to. So kung this is the first time that you are seeing this rules of inference, Medyo sa simula siguro mangangapa kayo, pero I find it easier to remember all these rules by making sense out of them. So kaya lagi kong tinatranslate siya dun sa Tagalog na pang nangyari si P, mangyayari si Q, and so on. Because that's one way for me to make sense of these rules of inference. Okay? And these are logical rules. So ibig sabihin, it should intuitively make sense, right? Okay, number 7 is a little bit simpler. It's simplification. The rule of simplification says P and Q. So kung totoo si P and Q, that means P must be true. Okay? Actually, pwede ring isang version ng simplification ay P and Q, therefore Q. Kasi anyway, alam natin na sa ito ay true, right? Alam natin true yung conjunction. Therefore, both propositions must be true. So if you have a conjunction, you can take from it either of the two propositions via the rule of simplification or SP. Okay? And then the last rule, hindi pa pala last, meron pang isa, meron pang dalawa. 8th rule is conjunction. So if you know P to be true and Q to be true, you can just put them together with a connective N. Anyway, alam na natin na totoo silang dalawa. Okay? Since P and Q are assumed to be true, then yung conclusion of P and Q will also be true. It's impossible for P and Q to be false. So that's the rule of conjunction. And lastly, the rule of addition. Kung alam mo na totoo si P, pwede kang maglagay ng kahit anong ka-or niya. So if P is true, then you can disjunct any proposition to it without affecting the truthfulness of the compound proposition. Kasi di ba sa or, required na may isang true. Pero alam natin true na si P. So pwede kang mag-or ng kahit na anong statement, regardless of its truth value. Okay? Now, these are the 9 rules. It might take some time for you to master all of them, but hopefully you get the gist of what their layman's meaning are. So, yeah. And then mentioned here, we can also use, aside from these rules, the rules of equivalence that you might have probably have seen before. Okay. Now, I think now we are ready to do a formal proof. So a formal proof is actually a sequence of propositions, each of which is a premise of that argument, or it is a deduction from preceding propositions via some rules of inference or rules of equivalence. Okay, and you probably have done this in high school. Remember when you did the proofs in geometry where you have 2-column proofs? So basically, that's the same tenet here. So ganun pa rin yung gagawin natin sa formal proof. Okay. So perhaps let's illustrate how this is used. Okay. Let's see this one. Illustration 20. So we want to prove the validity of the statement, of the following argument. Again, one way to do this is using the direct approach, wherein you do a truth table, pero that would be very tedious because how many propositions are there? So meron tayong 4 na propositions sa argument na to, A, B, C, and D. So if you want to create a truth table, ibig sabihin magkakaroon ka ng 2 to the 4th na rows, which is how many? You will have 16 rows. So that is really very tedious. Tapos kahit tanggalin mo pa yung mga cases wherein the premises will be false, medyo magkakaroon ka pa rin ng problema kasi compound yung mga propositions. So it might be difficult indeed to write a direct proof via truth tables. So and then you see here, medyo spoiler, meron lang 5 parts yung formal proof. And this formal proofs makes use of the rules of inference that we have seen before. Okay? Just remember, kapag ka walang grouping symbols, ibig sabihin magfa-follow tayo ng law precedence of the connectives. Laging huli yung implications. So the first premise probably will look like this. Not probably, but it will look like this. A or B implying C. Okay? Which, yeah. Which reminds me, mukhang tama yung suggestion sa chat kanina. Dun sa worksheet number 2, kapag ka walang connective, ibig sabihin susunod na siyang new premise na siya. I think Luis Fabian is correct in the chat na yeah, pag walang connective, mukhang bagong premise na siya. But I will re-upload the worksheet later just to clarify those things, okay? All right, so let's see how the proof goes. Now, the first few lines in your proof will consist of the premises of your argument. So for instance here, A or B implying C, that's the first premise, so you can copy it as your first line. The second premise should also be one of the lines in your argument, so just to write it there as the second line. So unahin yung isulat lahat ng premises. Ang reason nyo lang ilalagay dun sa second column ay premise. Kinopya lang natin sila mula dun sa given. And again, the idea here is we will use these premises together with the rules of inference or rules of equivalence para mapakita yung conclusion. So we want to arrive at the conclusion that C is true. Kunwari, hindi pa natin ito nakikita. Kunwari, wala pa yan. Purihin ko lang sila. Okay, pero alam na natin. Pero at least nakatago siya. Alright. So our goal is to show C, okay, or to get C coming from these two premises via some logical steps, all right? Now, tingnan natin, paano natin ito i-analyze? So, kailangan ko magkaroon ng C. Pero dun sa premises, saan lang ba ako nakakita ng C? Oh, dito lang ako nakakita ng C sa line number 1, which is premise number 1, all right? So, para makuha ko si C, mula sa isang conditional statement, kailangan magkaroon ako nung antecedent, right? Kailangan makuha ko tong antecedent na A or B. Kasi pag meron akong A or B, pwede kong gamitin yung modus ponens, which is basically a conditional statement plus its antecedent para makonclude ko or makuha ko yung consequent, right? But how can I get an A or B? Well, I cannot use line number 1. But if I go to line number 2, oh, I have A and D, which reminds me na conjunction to. So ibig sabihin, pwede kong kunin alin man dun sa dalawang propositions because conjunction is true implies that each of the premises is also true, right? So I can get A coming from line number 2 and I use simplification. Okay, so ilalagay nyo kung saan siyang line number nang galing at ano yung rule of inference na ginamit nyo. So the third line came from line number 2 via simplification. Okay, pero I'm not yet done because in order to use modus ponens, I should have the entire antecedent. Pero ang antecedent ay A or B. Meron pa lamang akong A. So ibig sabihin kulang pa ako. Pero luckily, the antecedent here has the connective or. Pero alam ko na si A ay true. So pwede akong mag-add kay A ng kahit na anong disjunct. Kasi yung or naman, kahit ano yung truth value ng pangalawang proposition, basta alam ko na yung first to be true. Alright? So that means from line number 3, I can simply put an or B, okay? And the reason for that is the addition rule. Okay? So that means I got line number 4 from line number 3 using the rule addition. Okay? And then finally, I already have A or B, and I also have a conditional statement with that disjunction as the antecedent. So I can use modus ponens on lines 1 and 4 to come up with a consequent. Okay? Dahil meron A or B implies C, alam ko na si A or B ay totoo, that means C should follow. So that means we got line number 5 from lines 1 and 4 via modus ponens. Okay, so parang naglalaro lang tayo dito. Meron kang puzzle, so you need to find all of these all the pieces together in order to get the conclusion. Okay, any questions? Okay, I'll take that as a no. Let's try exercise 21. Okay. And let's try to have a proof for this. Now again, your proof must begin with declaring the premises. So number one, I'll have S implying T. Reason is premise because it is one of the premises. Number two, not T and not U. This is another premise. And again, our goal is to show that not S is true. So we should come up with a not S in our proof here using rules of inference in conjunction with lines 1 and 2. All right? So again, magplano tayo. So kailangan kong makuha si not S. Kaya lang, if you look at the premises, walang not S dito. Meron lamang tayong S. So being here, to get a not S, paano ba tayo nakakuha ng not S galing sa isang implication? So nakukuha tayo ng not S sa isang implication via the modus tollens rule. Oh yes, sorry, spoiler. Hindi ko kagad nakita yung raise hand. Sorry guys. But yeah, I guess you were about to say using the modus tollens, right? But for modus tollens to apply, I need the negation of the consequent, all right? But that's not hard to do because we already have the negation of the consequent as one of the conjuncts in line number 2. So actually here I can just do number 3, not T, coming from line number 2 via simplification. Okay? Kasi pag and, pwede kong putulin at kunin yung isa dun sa dalawang conjuncts. Okay? And then now we have S implying T, and we have a not T, so that means we can conclude not S from 1 and 3 modus tollens. And we're done. Okay? Because we have gotten the desired conclusion. Okay? Or masyado bang madali yung mga examples? Illustration 22 might be more interesting, pero nandito na naman yung proof niya. So I hope it's okay if I leave that to you guys. So what you can do is to try to prove example 22 on your own, and then i-check nyo yung sagot nyo dito. Mas inuuna ko yung exercises para kasi wala kayong answer key. So, or nasa dulo pa ng word text. Pero, yeah. Mukhang mas madali kung ang babasahin nyo na ay, or ang itatry nyo sagutan na yung illustrations. There is a question in the chat. Sa worksheet po ba kailangan pa po ng QED? Well, it's a nice practice, though medyo makaluma na yung QED, quod erat demonstrandum. So yeah, you can put QED, or you can just put a block. You can just put a block box. Block box yung madalas kong ginagamit. Okay, to signify the end of the proof. Pero hindi naman siya technically required. Pero it would be a good practice to include a punctuation to denote the end of your proof. Para siyang yung hashtag 30 ng mga journalists, right? So yeah. So either use QED or just put a block box or just put a period, and that's fine. It's not a big deal, but it's a good practice. It's a tradition among mathematicians. So you are future mathematicians. So yeah, kailangan nyo nang masanay sa ganung practice. Okay. Unfortunately, it's already 10 minutes before the time, but I would like to go on 5 or 7 more minutes. So if you guys have classes after this, you are free to leave right now and just revisit the recording of the session, okay? But if you can't stay, please do para hindi nyo na kailangang antayin yung recordings later, okay? So, okay, try example 22, 8 steps yung proof already in here. But I want to tackle and end with conditional formal proof. A conditional formal proof is a method of proof that is useful whenever the whenever the conclusion is an implication. Okay? So kapag yung conclusion ay implication, yung antecedent ng conclusion can be used as a premise. Okay? Yun lang yung gustong sabihin ng conditional proof. So I guess we have here one example for that. Illustration 23. Okay. Look at the conclusion of the argument. The argument concludes with D implying F. So kapag ka ang conclusion ng argument ay isang conditional statement, you can use conditional proof, which will allow you to use the antecedent to be one of the premises. And the reason that you can put on your two-column proof is just CP or conditional proof. Okay, so let's try to read the proof of example of illustration 23. So the first two lines are just the premises copied over. Okay, reason, premise. Look at the conclusion. It's an implication. So sabi ng conditional proof, pwede mong kunin yung yung antecedent as one of your premises. So D automatically becomes part of your premises, and the reason there is CP, or conditional proof. And then what you want to come up with is the consequent of the conditional statement. So here we want to show that F is true. Okay. So inassume ko na si D ay true, so ang kailangan ko na lang ipakita si F ay true din. Kasi true si D, so ibig sabihin dapat si F ay maging true din para yung conclusion na conditional statement ay maging true. Okay. And so that's nothing very different from before. So let's see. Okay, so let's see how the proof went along. So here, sabi dito, we have premise. We have this coming from conditional proof, conditional proof technique. So ibig sabihin pwede akong mag-modus ponens because D is affirmed. So that means E will follow. And true enough, the reason is 1, 3, modus ponens. But where can I use E? If you look at the second premise, meron akong E dito, tapos andito yung desired F. So ibig sabihin, I can just split this conjunction up into two pieces and then get the first one. And that is valid because it is simply an application of the simplification rule, right? So from statement 2 or line 2, I can get the conjunct of the first conjunct. And the reason there is 2 via simplification. Okay? Tapos madali na siya, modus ponens na. Kasi si E ay nangyari. We already know that E always implies F. So that means F will follow from lines 5 and 4 via modus ponens. Actually, naging technical siya dun sa reason. Kasi dun sa modus ponens, kung babalikan niyo yung listahan, laging first premise yung conditional, second premise yung antecedent. Pero I will not pay too much attention to that. You can write 4 or 5 modus ponens, but it is nice practice to write the reason number, the line numbers in the reason column in the usual manner that we see in the list of the rules of inference. So that's why I prefer 5-4, but you can write 4-5. Okay. Okay. Now you can try exercise 24. Let's try example 26, because example 26 is a nice illustration that a conditional proof can be used more than once. Because if you see here, the conclusion is a conditional statement involving another conditional statement. So that means if I will use one iteration of a conditional proof, so magkakaroon ako ng dalawang ito. Oops. I will have these two guys as, of course, part of the premises. Tapos magko-conditional proof ako, 1, 2. Then conditional proof, pwede kong kunin yung antecedent ng conclusion. So si A, magiging part ng premises, ang reason ay conditional proof. Okay? But again, that will leave us with the task of showing that B implies D. Ito na yung updated nating conclusion that we want to derive from our arguments. Okay? Pero you see that our goal is another conditional statement. And so another iteration of conditional proof can be applied. Meaning we can borrow the antecedent of our new goal as one of the premises. So that means we can add B into our proof. And the reason again there is conditional proof. Okay. And then we want to show now, or the final goal is to show that D is true. Okay. How can we show that D is true? Well, I'm running out of time, pero I guess the rest of the proof is given here. Okay. In the handout, right? So is it okay if I leave reading? I'll leave reading the proof to you guys. At least I hope you get the gist of this topic. Medyo siguro sa simula mangangapa kayo dun sa rules of inference, but I hope they make sense. Kailangan nyo lang i-formalize yung thinking. Probably just to finish this worksheet, the study guide for this week. Probably I'll ask your resident instructors or your lab instructors to discuss the principle of reductio ad absurdum to you guys, which is indirect proof or proof by contradiction. I think there's a couple of examples here. You can do this on the laboratory. So if you have the means, kindly attend the laboratory sessions on Monday, because again, I will ask your lab instructors to discuss the principle of reductio ad absurdum. Sayang, gusto ko pa naman sa lecture gawin kasi it's so Harry Potterish yung reductio ad absurdum. Pero anyway, pinractice ko pa naman yung spell na yon. Pero yeah, I'll ask your resident instructors to do that so that on Tuesday, on Tuesday, we'll start with a brand new study guide. Okay? So that's it from me for today. Do you have any questions, parting thoughts? Then some remember merong worksheet, merong homework 0. Di pala homework 0, consent and declaration form that you need to fill up by Monday. So yeah, please do that. And then I'll update the worksheet later this afternoon. What else? I think that's it. If there are no questions, then thank you all for coming and getting up early. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the day. And let's see each other again on Tuesday. Have a good weekend, everybody. Bye.
Thank you po, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you po.